local lake is being investigated for a toxic waste spill. After hundreds of fish wash ashore a local lake, the water is now being tested for toxic waste. Recent mining activities could be to blame. Recreation has been closed for further investigation and for the safety of the public. No entry will be allowed, including swimming and fishing, and any fish caught within the last week should be discarded if not already consumed. After thorough testing of water samples and the dead fish, it has been determined that the local lake has been contaminated with high levels of cyanide. Because of the high levels of the toxic waste, fish were ultimately poisoned and died. Concerns of environmental damage is still being assessed, and an ongoing investigation as to how the cyanide was released into the water is being performed. After thorough investigation, a mining company is to blame for the recent cyanide contamination within the local lake. All recreation activities have been banned until complete cleanup has been performed. It has been determined that improper use of sodium cyanide solution is the root cause, seeping into our waterways from unregulated runoffs. The functional group of cyanide includes the cyano groups, and the formula structure can be seen on the screen. Cyanide comes in many forms, and the sources can come from natural sources such as from foods like fruit pits and seeds, lima beans, cassava, and almonds. Also cigarette smoke, pest extermination, mining for metals, manufacturing papers, plastics, and textiles, and photograph development. Cyanide entering the cells. So cyanide ions bind to the enzyme cytochrome C oxidase, which is located in the mitochondrial membrane in the mitochondria of cells. This denatures the cells and means that final transport of electrons from cytochrome C oxidase to oxygen cannot be completed. This prevents the cells from using oxygen, and in turn the cells die. So the dangers of cyanide: if a person is affected by small amounts, you can see them become dizzy, have a headache, nausea and vomiting, rapid breathing, rapid heart rate, restlessness, and weakness. If a person has been exposed to large amounts, they can go into convulsions, loss of consciousness, low blood pressure, lung injury, respiratory failure leading to death, and slow heart rate. Cyanide contamination in large amounts and even small amounts can negatively impact fish, humans, and our environment. Depending on the amount of exposure will depend on the impact. In this case, the water contamination, the amount of exposure was so high that it was detrimental and deadly to the fish within the lake and many small organisms within and around the lake. Cyanide and the heart and the nervous system. So cyanide poisoning may result in death, and survivors of serious cyanide poisoning may develop heart, brain, and nerve damage. The heart and nervous system's tissues depend on aerobic respiration, and since this process is disrupted with serious cyanide toxification, these organs fail and ultimately lead to death. Cyanide and the mitochondria. The organelle mitochondria is the energy powerhouse found in most eukaryotic organisms. The mitochondria's most important function is to produce energy. Cyanide is well known as an inhibitor of mitochondrial electron transport because it binds to the enzyme cytochrome C oxidase. This process of inhibition shuts down the aerobic generation of ATP, otherwise known as energy. Without proper energy, the organism will eventually die. Cyanide versus the catabolic process. Organisms need energy to survive. The catabolic process produces energy by breaking down molecules and converting them into energy. Cyanide interferes with this process, inhibiting the energy from forming. When all energy has been depleted and no new energy is coming in, the cells will eventually die. Enzyme cytochrome C oxidase versus cyanide. Since cyanide is an irreversible enzyme inhibitor, it will effectively disrupt the electron transport chain. Cyanide ions bind to the enzyme cytochrome C oxidase, which is located in the mitochondrial membrane in the mitochondria of cells. This denatures the cells and means that final transport of electrons from cytochrome C oxidase to oxygen cannot be completed, and if this cannot be completed, then ATP is not produced. And the central nervous system and heart are drastically affected, which could lead to death. So what happened? Well, due to the recent mining activities in the area, our waters, fish, and environment have been directly impacted by the mining company that improperly disposed of or did not contain their use of a toxic chemical called cyanide. Cyanide is commonly used among mining companies to extract gold from its ore. Fish and aquatic invertebrates are particularly sensitive to cyanide exposure. It blocks the absorption of oxygen by cells and causes the species to suffocate. Due to this tragic spill, our local lake will need extensive clearing of the toxin before it is deemed safe to be open to recreation again. The mining company will be held responsible, repercussions to be determined by a judge in the court of law. Thank you.